window with a copper roof on.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Delaware Public Service Commission meeting of April 19th. We have the minutes of April 5th before us. Does anyone have anything to do in terms of corrections or modifications, comments, accolades, or a motion perhaps with respect to the approval of the minutes of April 5th?
Move we adopt the minutes as presented for April the 5th, 2016.
Seconded.
Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. The consent agenda, and with respect to the consent agenda, I would just say that with respect to number 7, in the matter of the application of Level 3 Communications LLC for the approval to participate in a financing statement, that a motion to approve the consent agenda will mean that we have taken no action on number 7. No action will be taken on number 7. Anything on the consent agenda that any commissioner wishes to have taken off of the consent agenda, placed on the regular agenda?
Chair, I have some questions on item number 5, please.
Certainly. Number 5, the application of artesian water, and that would be Ms. Mayrack.
And I would like Amy Woodward to come up also from staff.
Pardon me. Point of order, Mr. Chair, please.
Certainly. Whatever point of order you want to make.
I think I'm mistaken. I think it's item number 6. It's a qualified fuel cell property. Apologize.
You're keeping them on their toes, Commissioner Gray.
Item number 5 is in the consent agenda. Item number 6 is where I have some questions, please.
You want to proceed, Mr. DeLosa? Is there to answer any questions you might have?
Yes.
No problem. I would point out, with respect to that item, I believe it's the end of the 4th year that we've been making this report on our agenda. Just as off the top of my mind, and probably not terribly relevant, but I'm not sure whether or not we should continue to do this or consider some other alternative. So I just sort of place that out there to think about while I give Commissioner Gray some time to come up with these questions.
What is the do this, Mr. Chair? I'm not sure. You say continue to do this.
Well, the docket you're inquiring about, I understand, is the Delmarva Power and Light Company for approval of qualified fuel cell provider project tariffs.
Right.
That changes, and we report on that every month, usually on the consent agenda. I think some lawyers have opined that that's not a legal necessity that we do this every month, that we might be able to do it in some other fashion, save a little bit of paper, a little bit of time and energy. I'm not saying that we should do that. I'm just suggesting that perhaps after 4 years, we might want to look at it again and maybe think about that issue.
Okay. So I finally found my place. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. If I look at this item, it's associated to order number 8875. And if I look then on page 5 of order 8875, I was confused in reading paragraph 4. Which for any future claims tariff K payment, Delmarva must provide detailed information on the outage events. Well, the supporting documentation didn't really provide much clarity. I was curious if someone could explain what that tariff K and what that action implies. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Mr. Goodman, do you have a ready answer to that question?
As long as you will take it subject to check, which is something that Jim and I don't like being said in our hearings, right, Jim? Which is this, as I recall, and I haven't read this tariff in a little while. K was related to like a force majeure type event. So if there was an outage, meaning the fuel cells were not operating, and under certain provisions of the legislation, they're entitled to payment regardless, that if that were to occur, we would provide the information needed for staff to be able to analyze that to see if it was legitimate. They've never had that happen, so it hasn't had to come to fruition. But of course, we would provide staff with anything they wanted, as we, I hope, have done all along. They ask something, we get it to them, we get it to them quickly.
Okay,
So that's my recollection, Your Honor.
So if the cells aren't working as a force majeure matter, then certain events would qualify for payment regardless. And you,
Yes.
Delmarva, would be responsible for providing the information. And I heard, I thought you say to staff, but also for the commission's review. And I was going to ask you another question. Have such an event happened, but you answered the question before I even asked it.
Yes,
So-
there's been no payments for, force majeure or outages. I know initially they were struggling with Eastern gas having a different ethane content than the Western gas. That's about as much as I can tell you from
Okay.
a chemical standpoint. So their production, but they weren't out. They just, their capacity wasn't, instead of running a 90% capacity factor, they were running 85 or something like that, meaning, if you're 10 megawatts and you're running a 90% capacity factor, then you're producing 9 instead of the full 10.
Right.
No one does 100. You're always out for some reason, So, but I think they've got that addressed. But there's never been an outage for which they've come in and sought any type of force majeure.
Okay, that's clarity that I was looking for, because it wasn't in the supporting documentation. When it popped up in the order, I was not really sure how to
And I'll
interpret.
double check that, Your Honor,
Okay.
to make sure I didn't tell you something that wasn't 100% correct
Right.
when I get back to you.
Mr. Chair, no further questions. Thank you very much for the
Thank
clarification.
you.
Any other commissioner have any questions with respect to an item on the consent agenda? If not, may we please have a motion concerning the consent agenda?
I so move.
You so move what?
Whatever is at hand.
Okay.
So consent, we accept consent agenda and the material.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
I second.
Is there any discussion on Commissioner Correa's motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. In the regular agenda, the first matter is in the matter of the application of Delmarva Power and Light Company to change the methodology for the calculation of balancing fees associated with the gas cost rate. Commission welcomes Ms. Scott on behalf of Delmarva and Mr. Denman, obviously Mr. Geddes, and Ms. Ori. Okay.
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. This is Delmarva's application that was filed back in February of 2015, I believe it was. And we filed this application as part of a settlement agreement that was reached with the parties concerning the GCR for 2013-2014. And that settlement had been approved by the Commission pursuant to Order 8578. And essentially what we've done is we have filed an application to propose changes to the way that we calculate balancing fees associated with the gas cost rate. In connection with this application, we did have 2 working group meetings where comment was received by members from the public. We then had an evidentiary hearing before hearing examiner Hay on January 6th. He issued his findings and recommendation report dated March 8th, wherein he recommended that what has been proposed in the application be approved. None of the parties filed any exceptions to the hearing examiner's report. And based on that report, we would ask that you follow the findings and recommendations of the hearing examiner and permit us to proceed with these fees. These fees would actually be included with our next GCR application. That filing would be made at the end of August. and the fees would go in on a temporary basis beginning November 1st, and then ultimately approved by the commission when we come forward to present the application to you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about this filing.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. Geddes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Staff reviewed, along with the DPA, the filing that the company made. As Ms. Scott indicated, this was originally a concern of staff and the DPA that the balancing fees were not being properly allocated and that the residential customers were paying more than their appropriate share. Based on the workshops and the discussions that have been outlined by Ms. Scott, there were some proposals to address this. The testimony sets forth those proposals. The hearing examiner reviewed the change in the allocation and found that it was appropriate. If you read the last several paragraphs, I think it's 55, 6, and 7 of his report, he basically excuse me. Commissioner Gray and I have the same issue this afternoon. If you look at paragraphs 55, 56, and 57, you'll see that in the hearing examiner's opinion, the proposed changes to the balancing fee calculation would more fairly apportion the transportation customer share of the fee based on excess volume. Obviously, the result of that would increase the fees to transportation customers and reduce the fees for residential customers, and more properly, at least from our perspective, allocate those costs. So staff supports the hearing examiner's opinion or recommendations and the proposed order 8862. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Ms. Iori?
Thank you, Chair Winslow and Commissioners. The Public Advocate also supports the hearing examiner's findings and recommendations and asks that the Commission approve them in their entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iori. Mr. Damon?
Yes, I'm here on behalf of Calpine Mid-Atlantic Energy, LLC, who intervened in this docket, and we've reviewed the proposed order and have no objection to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denman. Any commissioner have any question of the parties with respect to this matter? Doesn't appear to be any questions. All I would say is that I think that obviously the DPA did a good job on bringing this to our attention, and that the parties all did a great job of working together on the issues. It also proves that no pain, no gain. There's always a little bit of pain associated with some gain, and it looks like there may be in this particular situation. It looks positive, and I'd just like to express my appreciation to Hearing Examiner A for his work in this matter. And anybody else, commissioners, may make any comments or ask any questions of the parties, or make a motion, whichever you'd like.
Chair, I move that the Commission adopt order number 8862 as submitted.
Second the motion?
Any discussion on the motion to approve proposed order number 8862? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing schedule is devoid of activity today, this afternoon. And is there anyone here from the public who wishes to make any comment to the Public Service Commission? I don't see anybody that's approaching the bench with respect to that intent. Mr. Howard.
Chairman Winslow, Commissioners, if you will recall, probably back in 2002, 2003, there were some significant drought conditions in northern Newcastle County in particular. There was a water supply coordinating council that was established, and that was to ensure at least every 3 years to take a look at the water supply in Newcastle County to make sure that we didn't have any adequacy issues. We have recently received a communication from the Water Supply Coordinating Council, and I would ask Mr. Joshua Bowman to brief you on the status of that communications.
Thanks, Bob.
Mr. Bowman.
As Mr. Howard said, I have a little report here that's just updating the Commission regarding the self-sufficiency report submitted by the water utilities of northern Newcastle County. on or before July 1st of each reporting year, each of the 5 water utilities in the drought-sensitive area of Newcastle County, which lies north of the C&D Canal, which is referred to the northern Newcastle County area, has to submit to the Water Supply Coordinating Council for review and approval a report consisting of a consumer water conservation plan for the following 3-year period and a certification of adequate water supply for the projected year. The 2 water utilities that lie in this area that are regulated are Artesian Water Company and Suez Water Delaware, and they both filed their reports last summer for review by the Water Supply Coordinating Council. Artesian's consumer water conservation plan listed a few practices that they plan to utilize. I'll give you a few examples. One is various community outreach and education programs, a 3-year water conservation plan schedule, conservation-oriented inclining block rate structures, monthly billing of all customers, water system audit and loss control procedures, and direct source to customer metering. In Artesian's report, they stated that their consumer water conservation plan, that they have experienced a 7.88% decrease in average demand on a per customer basis, and that since 1992, when they first implemented their own water conservation plan, they have experienced a decrease in demand of 20.76%, which translates to roughly 59 gallons per customer per day. As far as their certification goes, they, according to the Water Supply Coordinating Council's projections included in their January 2015 memorandum, the peak maximum monthly water demand for Artesian for the year of 2018 is 20.3 million gallons per day. In Artesian's certification they filed with the Water Supply Coordinating Council, they state that they have a total water supply capacity of 29.02 million gallons per day. And this consists of 23.9 from production wells, 1.42 from their aquifer storage recovery well, and 3.7 through interconnections. So based on these projections that Artesian has listed, they would have a margin of safety of 8.72 million gallons per day, or roughly 43% of the projected demand. Artesian has certified that their water supply is adequate to ensure that they have the necessary capability to meet the needs of their customers during the recurrence of a 75-day drought of record. The other water utility, as I mentioned, was Suez, and I'll go through theirs as well. According to Suez's customer conservation plan, they plan to utilize various practices, and I'll again mention a few of them. One is public awareness, education, and communication. Suez also has increased block structure rates. Suez recently moved to monthly billing. They've listed several service and system improvements. They have an online conservation guide, and they have an evapotranspiration weather station system. As far as Suez's certification, according to the Water Supply Coordinating Council, their projections included in their January 2015 memorandum, the peak maximum monthly water demand for Suez for the year of 2018 is 20.8 million gallons per day. And in Suez's certification, they state that they have a total water supply capacity of 33.40, which consists of 20.6 from the Stanton Water Treatment Plant, 3.25 from the Christiana Water Treatment Plant, 8.65 through interconnections, and 1.0 from their aquifer storage recovery well. So based on these projections, Suez would have a margin of safety of 12.6 million gallons per day, or roughly 60.5% of projected demand. Suez certified that their water supply is adequate to ensure that they have the necessary capability to meet the needs of their customers during a recurrence of a 75-day drought of record. Now, on February 4th of 2016, the Water Supply Coordinating Council reviewed the reports submitted by all 5 of the water utilities in northern Newcastle County, and the Water Supply Coordinating Council found that there was no deficiencies in any of the reports, and they approved all 5 reports as satisfactory. The approved reports were then forwarded to the Public Service Commission for informational and convenience purposes on March 31st of 2016. So that is it.
We're good.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman.
Thank
Anybody have any questions of Mr. Bowman? Commissioner Drexler?
Mr. Bowman, I have a question about, you mentioned a decrease in usage regarding conservation for artesian water. And is that are they making a direct correlation between their education programs, or is it more because they went to monthly billing?
That I couldn't answer. All I have is the report itself that states, and I'll read to you where they include that. Evidently, Commissioner Gray and Mr. Gittes aren't the only ones that can't find it.
Out of curiosity, is there anybody here from a water company who wants to make any comments on this issue? I couldn't hear that, but that's okay.
David Scott Renzi on behalf of Artesian. I don't have any comments to make. I am not familiar with this report, but I'm more than happy to go back to Artesian and get the answers for you.
Thank you.
It would be nice to know the effect of monthly billing in terms of higher or lower delinquencies and any correlation between going from quarterly to monthly billing and a decrease in usage and education programs and that effect. It would be interesting to know that.
Mr. Correa?
So, to the best of your knowledge or so, do you know any programs going on to teach the children, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, before they become teenagers, that you can save the water by doing 1, 2, 3, 4, like a pamphlet, like a lecture, things like that?
They have in their part of their what I mentioned was their community outreach and education programs. Both of the companies mentioned multiple programs for school-aged kids.
Teach the parents.
Well, I guess that's
Mr. Chair, I also have a question. I have 2 questions. One is rhetorical. So, is water conservation on a mass scale really, at the end of the day, a good thing in that you have fewer gallons of water over which to pay for your infrastructure and your maintenance and improvement? Now, the reason I said it's a rhetorical question, there may or may not be anyone in the room who feels comfortable answering it. On the other hand, an actual question where you talked about the capacity against the peak usage, and you talked about the sourcing of that capacity, some of which is coming from interconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, will Artesian or Suez assume that they can interconnect and pull water volume from the other company through an interconnection when both may be experiencing a drought? And is that an assumption that each company can fulfill?
Well,
Help has arrived. Mr. Nielsen.
Well, first of all, keep in mind that
this exercise of looking at these has been transferred to the Water Supply Coordinating Council. So we didn't get into the details and that kind of thing. But it is they make assumptions. They're based on contracts and historical ability to take water from these other sources and stuff. So
I guess I'm just struggling to appreciate that if they're interconnected to each other and they're each suffering a drought, will they each be able to fulfill the expectation that portion of their water requirement can be fulfilled?
I believe the statute states that interconnections are excluded from the calculation to determine self-sufficiency. I have to check that exactly, but the PSC used to review them, and that was when my role was here. So as I recall, after a certain period of time, they have to prove that they have self-sufficient supply. It's essentially in-house, which is why they built the aquifer storage and recovery wells that they have. And I don't believe that they can include interconnection quantities in their determination of self-sufficiency. But again, I have to check that.
Anyone want to try the historical answer?
You can apply the same question to electricity usage as well.
Yeah.
And it has been an issue since 2000. No, before. What was the before Mr. Evans? Where's Todd? What was the name for the project that with the board that came apart to avoid building a new power plant? We're way off topic. I apologize. I'll come back with it for a while. But anyway, the idea of conservation and what it would do to rates, because it's very hard to make the argument to customers that they're conserving electricity, but the rates are going up. And it's an issue that many commissions have and are still struggling with.
Mr. Geddes makes an extremely good point. I can almost guarantee you that conservation will lead to increased rates. Whether this commission
subject to check.
No, I won't even do a subject to check on that.
Well, let's be a little bit careful and make the assumption that they will perhaps lead to increased rates. I'd hate to see that on the front page of the news, that if you conserve, your rates are going to go up.
You have to understand that that statement in front of the newspaper would certainly sell more newspapers and would be beneficial to the newspaper industry. Commissioner Drexler, going back to your question, I think what we would like to do is to look at that and see if there is an indication that the conservation that we're seeing is perhaps industrial related, or perhaps it's because of moving from quarterly to monthly billing. I think that deserves an answer, and we will look at that and bring it back to you.
yeah, I think the companies do look at that, address that, and talk about that in the reports, what they believe that it's causing some of that. And there's, it amounts to a lot of different things, changes in plumbing codes. Of course, they point to the monthly billing and the incline rate blocks as well. So there's a lot of different things that kind of contribute to that. So.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Appreciate that. Chairman Winslow and Commissioners, I would like to report to you also that we will be having an evidentiary hearing at our May 3rd meeting with respect to Delmarva Power and Light Company's solar renewable energy credits. And that will be at our commission meeting next Tuesday, May the 3rd, 2016, starting at 1 o'clock.
Not next Tuesday.
Meeting not next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Next meeting.
Tuesday. Yes, sorry. I stand corrected, subject to check.
And we check.
Well, thank you all very much for your attendance. The meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.